All statements and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are not representative of the Orthochat, its host, or its producers, and should not be associated with the podcast unless explicitly stated by the host.
You are listening to the Orthochat by Yanni Katsadas.
Σιγαργατάκησε όλος τη αμαρτία και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραθυμία της εξαναστήσης σε κείμενο.
Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον, 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 Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον.
Greetings in Christ, brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 50 of the Orthochat. We are here today with Father Gregory Horton. Father, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Yanni.
Thank God. Would you like to start us off with a prayer?
Yep, I will love to do that. O Heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of Truth, Lord, everywhere present and fillest all things, treasure of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good one.
Amen. Father, before we get started, how's things since the last time we talked like a week ago?
Well, it's been a good week, I must say. I've been too busy for my own good. How's that?
That's busy hands are blessed hands. That's what I always say to everybody. So that's good to hear, truly. And the last time we talked, we got your thoughts on what building a mission parish is like, on what fostering a sense of community within a parish family is like, but I want to talk more about you and I want to talk about your life. So in your younger years, what was life like and what about it made you care about God and the church?
Well, I was born and raised back east in New Jersey as a Roman Catholic, and that's a whole culture in and of itself. Our whole family was Catholic. I went to Catholic school my whole life, and I would say that at about the age of 8, I realized I wanted to become a priest. Right from that young age, I was the kid who would sit at the feet of the visiting missionaries when they would come and talk about missions around the world, etc. And I would just be fascinated, asking a million questions and that kind of thing. So I guess you could say it's been with me for a long time.
I know what you mean.
And the family was Roman Catholic, like I said, and church every week and school every day and helping the nuns do this or that in 4th grade and 5th grade. And it was just kind of a submerged into that lifestyle and into that mindset already. I had the foundation.
Right. And moving through this, what's the story of you eventually coming to Orthodoxy from Roman Catholicism? Like, what was the catalyst to spark that event, and how did you eventually make the transition?
Okay, well, maybe for this part of the interview, I'm going to charge everybody $50 tickets because this is a great story. Oh my gosh. I went to the Roman Catholic college of St. Vincent in Western Pennsylvania. It's very close to Antiochian Village, actually, Latrobe, Pennsylvania. And when I went there, gosh, back in 78, I still had the same vision. I was going to go to school. I studied music. Then I was simply going to move on into the seminary, and who knows. But during that time, I started having a crisis of faith. I started questioning some of the teachings of the church. And honestly, I questioned some of the morality, some of what was going on in the church at the time. And so I said, you know what? This isn't exactly what I thought. And if the church could be wrong about this or this or this, maybe they're wrong about like celibacy, enforced celibacy. So I said, you know what? I'm going to date a girl. I'm going to find somebody and So, of course, in a Roman Catholic school, and ours was an all boys school, but we had a sister school down the road, an all girls school, Seton Hill College, and that's where the music department was actually. So I would bus over there every day. And then the second year I was there, I ran into my, unbeknownst to me, future wife. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story, although it's a good story about how I couldn't see her the whole first year that she was there because she wore these big dark glasses that covered half of her face. And the second year she wore contact lenses, and I said, "Wow, who are you? You have nice eyes." And she tells the story that at that point she had a choice. She said this could be something huge if I would just say yes to it, and she did. And then we started going together. We went to a couple of dances and whatnot. About 3 months in, I told her, "Oh, by the way, I've been wanting to be a priest my whole life." Oh my gosh, it really shattered her world for because she's Roman Catholic, I'm Roman Catholic, and the she said if it was another woman or another girl, I would just probably slap you both and then just leave. But she says I did not want to compete against God because it's a big deal, like if someone wants to be a priest. So I kind of drove her crazy for about 3 years. Well, now we've been married 41, so I've kind of driven her crazy for about 44 years. But the first three, it was I would go home and my family would want me to do this or this or this, and then kind of convince me that maybe the priesthood is the way I should go. And of course, there's celibacy in the Catholic Church. So it was an up and down roller coaster experience. And I tell you, when I graduated, she had one more year of school. When I graduated, I said, I can't make this decision. It was literally tearing me in half. It was unbelievable. So I did the next best thing and I joined the Air Force Band of New England. How's that? It's like the French Foreign Legion. Some join to remember, some join to forget. I was joining to try to make sense of this decision. And why was I in such a position? But after about 6 months, I figured out, God put this woman in my life. I'm already starting to steer away from Roman Catholic teaching anyway. I said, if it was just women in general, that would be something. But this woman has come into my life and she's incarnate as my future wife. And you know what? I'm going to go for that. So left the Air Force Band, went back to where she was living. She graduated in the morning on a certain day in May. I better say it, May 7th, so that she doesn't get angry at me. And then in the afternoon, we got married in the college chapel. We had a beautiful, it was like a graduation slash wedding party, and it was all of our friends played in the
Wow.
band. It was really nice. But then ran into a bit of a, what would you call it, a crisis. We went away. We went to Wisconsin to do some work. We were working at a restaurant and a hotel, the Schwartz Resort Hotel, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. I'll never forget it. It was a good experience. And during that time, uh, gosh, it was difficult to find, because it was like a resort, like a vacation place. So the Catholic Church there, the priest would never do any teaching. He'd say, "Well, you're all on vacation, no sermon this week." And then we'd go home and I said, we're not being fed, nothing. So by the time the end of the summer was over, I was I was really disillusioned with not only not being able to serve in the church, but now not even kind of it wasn't alive for me anymore. Something. So we moved to Miami. We took a job down there at a kosher Jewish hotel restaurant on Miami Beach, and that's pretty good preparation for the priesthood, Yanni. It's you got to be patient, you have to be understanding, and you have to you get it. So while there, the crisis really hit. It was Christmas Eve, and I had conveniently gotten food poisoning that day, so I didn't have to go to midnight mass. My wife was she was so excited about wanting to go to midnight mass, and I was sick. And so she finally believed me, and she went by herself and she told me that she wept, she bawled during the whole mass because, well, let frankly, we had a very good life. We paid our student loans off in 1 year. So all the worldly stuff was fine, but we had a big hole in our spiritual life and in our marriage in that sense. So she came home, and I remember she tells the story a little differently, but I remember her coming, slamming her hand on the table and saying, "That's it. We have to find a church. We have to go to church. Our spiritual life is dying on the vine." I said, I agree with you, but my one caveat is that it cannot be the Roman Catholic Church. I said, but I'm ready to listen. So she said, "That's good. We're going to find another church." And how do you find another church when you're born and bred back east in the Roman Catholic culture and all your families? Whew. But she said, "We're going to find it." I said, "How do you find another church?" She said, "We are going to the library." Oh my gosh. I said, "What a fun date that's going to be. Go to the library and find the church that we have always been looking for, huh?" Okay. I'm still open. I'm still game. And then she says, "Not only that, we're not going to look in any church propaganda, nobody's own writings. We're going to look in the Encyclopedia of Religions." And I said, oh my, this is getting better all the time. Okay. So there in the Encyclopedia of Religions in the South Miami Library, we start wading through, non-Christian faiths. I said, "Keep going. I know we're Christian, And then we started looking at various Protestant churches, and I said, "There's some truth here. There's some, snippets here, but I think we'll just eat that up in about 5 minutes because I knew as much, I knew enough to know that we were sacramental people, at least." And then somehow, some way, we stumbled across the Orthodox Church in the pages of the Encyclopedia of Religions. And we're reading, she's reading, I'm reading, and she said, "Isn't this what we've always believed without all the other stuff that we know?" I said, "Yep, uh-huh." And then, okay, now we found it in the pages of the encyclopedia. What do we do about it? So I called Greek Orthodox Church, big cathedral of St. Sophia in Miami. And I started telling the priest my story. And I hate to tell you, Yanni, but he hung up on me right away because I found out later he didn't speak a word of English. So,
Ah,
so I said, okay, maybe we have to be Greek or Russian to join this church. Maybe you have to be like already in that mindset and in that culture and in that language. But we found in the pages of the yellow pages under Orthodox churches, we found Orthodox Cathedral of Christ the Savior. It was an OCA church. And you know what it said there? Serving all national backgrounds. And I said, that's us. If that's not us, this Orthodox church, it's not for us. So sure enough, we went and we met Father George of blessed memory. He was a missionary priest himself. He had started 17 missions and parishes in the Diocese of the South, OCA. So all of that caught my eye, and he gave us a stack of books to read. And it wasn't long. We became catechumens, and it wasn't very long after that we became Orthodox Christians. We just couldn't wait to get to every service. This was like January, so Lent was coming. So during Great Lent, we would work morning and evening at the restaurant, at the kosher Jewish restaurant, hotel, and then cut out of there and go to a morning service, like a morning pre-sanctified, and then cut out of the evening service and go to an evening service. So it was amazing. That's when we actually couldn't get enough. We fell in love with the Orthodox Church. All the teachings, all the services, all the music, you just name it. We were hooked.
hmm. You know, I think one of the oldest sayings for even people that are just nominally religious is that God works in mysterious ways. And I don't think that's better represented anywhere than how love works. More specifically between men and women. And there's no discernible reason why we find the people we find, how we find them. By the time you're in a relationship with somebody that you really care about, you could look back and be like, "Oh my goodness, how did I get here?" And um, you know, we're in a particular position here in the United States of America where it's not like the old countries for Orthodox Christians. Young men are meeting women from all walks of life. Young women are meeting men that are, like you at a point figuring out, what your relationship with God looks like. And there's a non-zero number of young people that are meeting others that are in the Orthodox faith or, whichever side it may be, that are wondering, I really love this person. I really think this is a good match for me. How do I bring them into the faith? Do you think this is something that just kind of naturally happens? Is this something that people should pursue if they're Orthodox Christians and the other person is outside of the faith? How do you think people should handle these situations? Because it happens quite often from what I could tell.
Well, the basic answer is yes. We should not shy away. But from the beginning, we have to have that conversation. How important is my faith to me, and how important is your faith to you? And, like if it's just going to be a nominal on both sides, a nominal faith, then gosh, it really doesn't matter. You're just getting married and you're not really serious about your faith. But let's go to the other. That has a certain set of pastoral, solutions to it. But if you're not, if you are serious, if you are committed, then I think that what we have to do is have that conversation each and every, step of the way, along the way. Otherwise, what happens is the emotion becomes too strong. You fall in love, you have a relationship, romance, etc. And then as an afterthought, oh, by the way, what's your religion? And then how are we going to live that out? And oftentimes it becomes a crisis, or like I said, a nominal thing. But when you're combining the deepest relationship, the most intimate relationship of your life, with the deepest part of who you are spiritually and interiorly, those two had better not clash, because something is going to give. Either your faith is going to give, your spouse's faith is going to give, or the marriage is going to give. Or some combination thereof. And I've dealt with every type of situation because of the scenario that you're laying out, Yanni. It's not anything new. It's been with us for decades, as far as I can tell. I've been a priest since the 80s, and it was right from then that this was happening. So you don't want 20, 30 years down the road for the crisis to come to a head. So have that conversation right from the beginning if you're serious about the faith, and you'll find many times other people are curious. They're interested, and they're saying, "Okay, the Orthodox Church, what is that?" And then you have to kind of teach them. You have to be a teacher, teach them not only what we believe but how we live, because how we live is going to play a big part in our marriage, in our relationship, and it'll morph through the years. I mean, my wife never expected in a million years she would be a priest's wife. That doesn't even exist in the church we came from. So it was a learning experience all the way through. And marriages in general, but in particular, in a marriage where two people are of mixed religion, it's very difficult to navigate that if one of them isn't going to convert, and
Right.
preferably the one who becomes Orthodox. But every single scenario is wrought with pastoral challenges that we have to help these people learn that you're not just getting married for this guy. You're not just getting married for Yanni. My gosh, you're getting married because you love the faith. But how about if you love the faith first and then work on the relationship in terms of progressing towards marriage? What if we do it that way? And gosh, some people just don't know how to do that because the relationship is the biggest thing. And I found also that when a relationship ends, in like even what do they call it? Courtship ends, that, gosh, the faith ends for the other person because it was only about the relationship. So, like I said, there's a lot of variations on this theme, and we have to sort out where people's hearts really are.
Right.
Am I seeking first a marriage or first Christ and the kingdom of God? And depending on how you answer that question, you'll know what direction it'll go, at least initially.
Yeah. And, you know, even just talking about the transition itself from something like Catholicism into Orthodoxy, or even Protestant, or anything into Orthodoxy, you know, as as a Greek Orthodox Christian, I could say that I grew up with a strong sense of what I would call cultural security. And what I mean by that is, you know, growing up in a Greek community, going back to Greece, you know, back and forth, I was in Greek churches with Greek people, and I just so happened by the grace of God to be born in the true ancient faith. And in saying that, I've been seeing it a lot over the past couple of years as we've had this wave of new converts, people from America who care about Christ and love the church. What, you know, even though the church might not be what they think it is, they have an issue with this cultural barrier that stands between who they grew up as and who they are and what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, at least from their perception. And you know, the church across jurisdictions has found various solutions to this. You know, if somebody wants a more Western orientation, America's a Western country. The Russian Orthodox Church probably has the most elements of that, and sometimes people decide to go to a Western Rite church, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that we've tried responding to this challenge. But even so, I've seen plenty of Roman Catholics specifically steer away from the Orthodox Church, not because they think anything we believe is false, and not because they don't love, um, I guess, what we are, but because it's not them in a very abstract way or in a very cultural way. How do we get people over this hump who think orthodoxy is at odds with their cultural foundations?
Well, yikes. Let me start with from pop culture, My
Mm.
Big Fat Greek Wedding. So you know this movie.
Yeah, it's my life.
My Big Fat Greek Wedding, there's one part of that movie that I really strongly objected to. And it was when the fiance, who's going to become the husband, he gets baptized in the Orthodox Church. And after his baptism, he says something very striking. You know what? You remember what it is? He says, "Now I'm Greek."
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I remember
He
that.
didn't say, "Now I'm Orthodox," because Orthodoxy in that context was downplayed, even in a popular movie. So, now I'm Greek. And I think for a long time it was, if you married into the Orthodox Church of any ethnic flavor, you were expected to become, well, at least familiar with, and if not enamored with, that particular culture, and had to basically give up your own. But that changed pretty fast. Like in the 80s and 90s, it started changing rapidly. Remember with the entrance into the Church of the Evangelical Orthodox, then we had a whole new set of circumstances to deal with, and it's been a steady flow after that of Americans, not culturally Orthodox at all, who are joining the faith for particular belief reasons and way of life reasons. So we'll go with that right now. What I'm thinking is parishes like mine. So we've started three parishes out here, two in Idaho, and then one just over the border in Spokane Valley, Washington. And all three of those are primarily converts who've converted in their adult life. In other words, they did not, they didn't have the benefit of being raised or born into the Orthodox faith and cultivated all the way through. They had to find it themselves, which is a miracle in and of itself. But when you put together over the years parishes that have primarily all those types of people who have made that same basic kind of choice, it's a different dynamic. I would say that the American culture, if you can even discern what that is, I don't know how to define that, but people who come from this society, this culture, they need more of what the Greek or Russian or Bulgarian or Serbian or Arabic, what the Christians of the Middle East and of Eastern Europe had, which was what you defined as kind of a basic security. I had cultural security. Now, here's where the revolutionary statement comes. We have to find our basic cultural security as Pan-Orthodox parishes in the church. Do you hear that? I mean, that's countercultural. It's a little bit countercultural, certainly from the societies of the West, like the United States and Canada. We have to form our own phronima, our own mindset, not over and against the culture of the United States or any other Western country, but somehow insulating ourselves from how can I say it, the negative or even the threatening portions of those societies. I remember Frank Schaeffer years ago, he would say that when all the immigrants would come from Greece and, Eastern Europe and Russia, they would have children here and grandchildren, and they themselves were not equipped. They could not withstand the barrage of secular thought and all the other kinds of thinking that form the melting pot of the United States. And so their children, they vanished. They would fall, melt into the woodwork of the culture or do something like anti-church. A couple of them would be, how shall we say, faithful. They would remain faithful, or they would come back to the faith when they had children of their own, or many, many different scenarios. But I would say a lot of them got swallowed up by this juggernaut of Western society, the Western, mentality. And for an ethnic family, that's who's trying to become more American, fairly, in fairness. And in doing so, gosh, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So a parish like this one is rooted in all the different mindsets of the United States of America, and somehow we have to synthesize that. We have to make it kind of the faith is first. The faith is above any kind of political or cultural consideration. Period.
Right. And, if you look at history, it becomes obvious that people have integrated Orthodoxy into their nationality and culture and ethnicity to make it a more intimate part of people's lives in a more natural sense before they do it intentionally for themselves. And we've seen this with the Greek Orthodox Church, with the Russians, the Antiochians, the Arabic peoples, and it's the big question: what is American Orthodoxy going to look like? Because just like with any culture, there's plenty parts of what being an American is that are beautiful, but there's also plenty of parts of it that need to be shed away if it is to integrate within Orthodoxy in a healthy way, and that's not exclusive to America. The Greeks had to kind of get rid of their tendencies of magic and witchcraft that they carried over from their more ancient days and transition into the faith, even though elements of that helped them understand Christ and the church better. And this is true for every culture. So what do you think, if you even have a prediction about something like this, American Orthodoxy is going to look like once we have thousands of babies born that are born and then baptized shortly after, thousands of people that have developed this sense of national identity in coherence with their faith?
Well, so I'm an American through and through. I mean, I was born here and raised. I think like an American with now the added 40 years of the Orthodox mindset, phronima. And my wife and I have both developed that through the years, but we're still American. And what's more, even more striking, all of our children were born into the faith. They were born and raised Orthodox Christians. So think about that. What you have now are what we call cradle Orthodox, who are thoroughly American or thoroughly of a culture which is not one of the mother country Orthodox, lands. So we have to deal with what does that mean? What does it mean to be always born in Western Europe or the United States, South America, whatever, and on the other hand, be born into the Orthodox Church? Can we develop as minorities in these countries? Can we develop, like I said, that mindset of the church first? We have to, because we're always going to be American. We've been born and raised as Americans. We have hot dogs and apple pie and all the rest of it. But what's different about us? What's going to be different? See, in the old countries, they were rather intertwined, the culture and the faith, et cetera, for good or for bad. There are different ways to look at that. But in this culture, it's not intertwined. Our faith is not intertwined. So we can intertwine, if you will, or baptize that which is baptizable. But those things, like you said, which have to be discarded, they should be discarded. Now, I'm no prophet, so I don't know what it's going to look like going forward more and more and more. I would just pray that people would not allow the faith to be watered down, And what do I mean by that? Well, if there's a stark falsehood, that's one thing you stand up against and say, that's just never been part of Christianity, certainly not part of the church. But as things maybe slowly erode, we get seduced. There's seductive ways of, falling away from the truth. And that's both in way of life. We start doing more things that are maybe questionable as an Orthodox Christian, or even belief. Like, what if you do marry somebody and you have to compromise some beliefs in order to, get along or live in a marriage, or a million other scenarios of what's going to have to give? What am I going to have to compromise? So now, these days, you have the super Orthodox, I guess you would call them, those who don't want to compromise on anything. And then you have the other extreme, those who would compromise on just about anything because the faith hasn't become totally integral to their life yet. So my sense is that we need the balance, because you're going to run into situations where you do need to balance that out. Not compromising the faith, not compromising your way of life, etc., but somehow also not becoming a sectarian, like closing off people, judging people and saying, I could never be associated with you. I could never be your friend. Why? Because you're not Orthodox and you don't even care to know anything about it. We have to be careful. Christ met all kinds of people, many, many walks of life, and sinners top to bottom, and he ate with them. He went into their societies, he went into their homes, etc. And that's a striking feature of Christianity. We have to be able to meet people where they are. If we're going to be the evangelistic and missionary church that we're supposed to be, how are we going to do it? Just staying in our own little grouping, our own small little circles. I was teaching last night. We have a reading group. I'm teaching, by the way, Experiences During the Divine Liturgy, which is an amazing book written by a Greek priest in Greece. So, and while we were talking about that, we talked about, how would it be if the apostles who loved each other, they were in a society together with Christ, and they were 12, and then later on they were 70, but that small group of people at some point stopped being just insulated and together, only, and they had to go out, and they drew lots, who was going to go where. Someone to India, Africa, Europe, everywhere, and they had to leave one another in order to spread the gospel. They had to leave those whom they had always known and loved in the faith, and gone to other places and met with them, and these other people met with them, catechized them, loved them, became one with them, another group, another community joining the church. This is phenomenal. If you look at just the demographic explosion of Christianity during those early years, even a persecuted church. Oh my gosh, this is something that I think not by force, not by violence, like other faiths might do, but by persuasion, by simply, inspiring whole groups of people that this is the right way to live. So why would we want to abandon that? When did we abandon that? That's not us. We can't stay insulated. The apostles didn't. God forbid if they did. What would we have now?
Very interesting. And concerning you specifically, once you kind of got through this whole event with, this woman that eventually became your wife, what was your experience in your pastoral education like? And were there any, I guess, events there that still stick with you in a positive way?
Well, first of all, I have to go back to our time in Miami. I remember asking Father George, because the spark was starting to reignite. And I said, "Do you have seminaries?" And he was like very tongue in cheek. He said, "Yes, we have seminaries." And, a million of questions that I wasn't thinking about before that. And then eventually I did apply to two seminaries, both St. Tikhon's and St. Vladimir's, accepted to both, but being kind of the big shot, big headed, young idiot that I was, I said, "Oh, I have to go to St. Vlad's. It has a big degree, Master of Divinity, da da da." St. Tikhon's was not accredited at the time. So, but just goes to show how you said God works in mysterious ways. Well, we arrive after another summer in Wisconsin. We arrive to start seminary at St. Vlad's. And I'll tell you the truth, Yanni, we could not find a place to live. We were staying with another seminarian, a senior. And, well, even before that, the minute we landed, we were parking there. We're pulling up to park. And an old priest comes out and says, "You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here." And we looked at each other and said, what is this? And turns out we weren't supposed to park there. And it was none other than Father John Mindorf.
No kidding.
He was telling, "You're not supposed to be here." Now, when Father John Mindorf tells you you're not supposed to be here, you take it seriously. But more than that, the other student that was supposed to meet us forgot all about us. And we were sitting there from morning till night in the car and looking around a little bit because we had a designated place where he was going to meet us. And, I wept. I was like, I said, "Gosh, maybe we're not supposed to be here." Because I didn't know about the whole parking thing. We're not supposed to be here. Huh. So a week goes by, and I don't know if you know anything about housing in around St. Vladimir's. It's horrendous. At least at that time, there was no married student housing at all. So you had to go look for an apartment, and we had to spend $150 just for a list of available apartments that would be for rent. And we were going further and further and further away from the seminary. We were ending up near Yonkers. We were almost down in Yonkers. And the last straw was there was an apartment. I think it was $1,000 a month, and it was back in 19. What would that be? 1986, 85, 85. And we're looking, and this middle he was a Middle Eastern guy. He took us upstairs. It was like no elevator, 6 flights of stairs, and there were holes in the wall, and it was really not very clean. So we're looking in the apartment, and all of us eventually kind of congregated in the bathroom. Somehow we had met there, and we're looking at this toilet, Yanni, and it doesn't have a toilet seat cover. It looks like a prison toilet. And we're looking, and I said, "Well, I have to ask a question. Where's the toilet seat?" And the guy said, "Oh, no, 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 no. That's a personal item." And that just kind of put me over the edge.
The
I said, "You're
personal
right.
item.
That's your personal item." I grabbed my wife, and I said, "He's right. Ours is in the car. Let's go." And we ran out, and we went back to the seminary, deciding we're not ready for seminary right now because of all these events. And then we hooked up our wagon and drove to New Jersey, and we kind of reestablished our life around my family in the middle of New Jersey, and we both got jobs. We said, okay, maybe this is a pipe dream. We both got jobs, and I had a job for Bradley's. I don't know if you might be too young to know that. It's like a Kmart or discount store, and I was working as a manager there, a trainee, and my wife worked for Radio Shack, and that's also defunct now, but she was a manager trainee there. So we were just minding our own business. So this is about August, September. So now it starts getting on November, and we get a letter from Father George in Miami. He says, I don't know what happened, because we were kind of embarrassed to even tell him what we were doing. He said, I don't know what happened, but I want you to take a quiet ride, no fanfare. I know you always like to yell everything out, but go to St. Ticon's, take a little drive. So we did. We drove out to St. Ticon's, and it was in December actually that we finally made the drive, and it was a beautiful day. And the minute my wife falls in love with it in a second, because it's very rural, a lot of trees, etc. It wasn't the big city, which she does not like the big city. So we get out, and the dean of students and the bishop both recognized me from a picture that I had in my application to St. Ticon's like the year before. I had forgotten all about it. And they called me by name. And my name, by the way, is Francis. It wasn't, Gregory was my name after conversion, but they remembered Francis from the application. So, and you know who else had the name Francis?
Who?
Joseph the Hesychast, wasn't he? Or was it St. Paisius? One of them was Francis. I
Oh
can't
my,
remember.
it was Saint Joseph the Hesychast. I
Joseph the
believe
Hesychast,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Joseph the Hesychast. So I said, well, that's good, but I didn't take the name Francis. I took the name Gregory. So, but back to the story. So then we had a tour, we had lunch, and we get into the office with the dean of students, and he says, I told him, I said, maybe I'm still interested in seminary, maybe in the fall, and this is December. And he said, no, 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 you're coming in January. You're coming in January. And I said, oh my gosh, we have jobs, we have a house. I said, but you know what? I've been, I haven't been very obedient or very, humble about this whole process. If what you say is true, it'll happen. If it's a God thing, it's going to happen. So I went and I told my manager, the boss of the whole store, they were going to make me like an assistant manager. And it was like, yeah, I was on a track. And I regretted the fact that I had to tell him, well, I'm thinking about going to seminary next month. And he was so delighted. He said, I'm married to a Greek Orthodox woman. And so they threw me this big party, give me all these hundreds of dollars. And so that was that. And my wife, who was finishing up her program at Radio Shack, and they loved her. She was a great worker for them. And in order to get transferred, they don't transfer in that company. They didn't transfer at the time. And this was not only a district transfer, this would be like a whole regional transfer, like a big deal. And the guy liked her so much, he said, I'm going to make a call. And he called the regional manager up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, told him the story. And the guy says, oh my gosh, we just opened a new store. And it was not 5 miles from the seminary, a little place called Einan, Carbondale, Einan, Pennsylvania. And we need a manager. We've been looking for one. And so she just kind of fell right into that. And it was that job that put me through seminary, her working in that Radio Shack store. The third and final straw was when we went back up looking for an apartment, remembering the nightmare we had in New York. So we go to this place in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, and it's the whole bottom floor of a house. And it was $180, heat included. Oh my gosh. I looked at my wife. There was another couple there at the same time looking. And the landlord said, well, whoever can come up with the money first gets it. And I looked at my wife. I said, well, I guess we're going to seminary. And they gave him the money, and we were off to the races. And I made up that semester in the summertime after that with private tutorials. It was a pretty good experience, actually.
That's wonderful.
2.5 years. Beautiful, beautiful experience in the seminary in Pennsylvania. Now, I'm not saying that St. Vladimir's isn't for everybody, but it wasn't for me for some reason. None of the events unfolded for me. Nothing, it didn't seem blessed. So that's when we took our retreat and tried to reassess everything.
Right. And you have to kind of listen to your intuition when it comes to things like that. You know, it could come down to participating in working towards the priesthood at all, or just, you know, where you're at down to the classes. It's just it's dynamic in such a way. And so after you finally graduated from that, where did you start off first? What did your life first look like as a priest when you started?
Well, I graduated as a deacon. I was ordained in 87 and during my final year. So I was traveling around with the bishop on mission trips all during Great Land. It's really a ball, you know. But when I graduated, then it was time to try to figure out what we were going to do. And I felt that I owed my original parish, the one in Miami, the cathedral. I owed them something for, you know, introducing this life to me and sending me off. And so we went back to Miami as a deacon. I stayed a deacon for another probably year and a half, year and a quarter. And I was serving at the cathedrals, serving with then Archbishop Dimitri of blessed memory, who we would go back, we would go all around the Diocese of the South, and I would just travel with him and serve with him. It was amazing. What a great experience. But eventually we found ourselves, you know, running out of money and, you know, not deacons don't make very much, you know, as you can imagine, if you don't have a job. And I worked for the bookstore, and so I was getting paid a little bit by the bookstore, a little bit by the parish, a little bit by the diocese, you know. But eventually we realized it's time to figure it out. So I petitioned for ordination, and Archbishop Herman in Eastern Pennsylvania took me, and when was that? Let's see. It was 1988 that we traveled back up to Pennsylvania, and I took the little parish in Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, just outside of Allentown, about an hour and a half north of Philadelphia. And that was my first parish. I was ordained at St. Tikhon's and did, you know, 7 days of study, morning and night, services at the monastery church. And then finally, he brought me to the parish, and we were there for the first 7 years of our priesthood. Unfortunately, now that church, I think I said it in my last interview with Father David, that church no longer exists. It kind of fell away from, how do you say, viability. And they had to sell it, and it's a little sad story there. But that's where I was the first 7 years.
Right. And what does your pastoral life and work look like now? I know we talked about it a little bit before, but do you see any big changes coming in the future for what your parish and your life as a priest is going to look like in the next couple of years?
Well, Yanni, I'm an old guy. I think I told you that 10 times, right? I'm an old guy, so I'm trying to figure out. I don't have the energy I used to, so I can't do a million things. Can't even start another mission close because I don't need two full-time jobs. So I would love to get another priest. Put this out everywhere. I would love to get a second priest, somebody who has like a similar drive, similar missionary activity, similar, you know, as close as possible, except all of my sinfulness. He can come here without all of that baggage.
Right.
But if he comes, I think we can do a lot of things. Teaching to me is paramount. To just do a lot of teaching in every kind of context, both in person and like this, even on the internet. It's very good. As much teaching as possible, because I'm doing a baptism. I think I told you every week for the next 2 months. Every week we have at least one baptism coming. So that dynamic isn't going to slow down. I don't think so. Even though I'm slowing down, the church is not slowing down. So what to do? Focus on the youth, on the children, on the teenagers especially, and we have good lay people who are doing programs with them. Focus on people coming into the church, again, emphasis on teaching, and just have services. Have the weekly services, you know, like all through the week. I'm going to baptize somebody Friday, we'll do a liturgy. Saturday, we'll do a liturgy. I'm going to baptize someone, and we'll do liturgy. So not just Sundays. I think we talked about that last time. Not just once or twice a week, but to have the church open and available like every day for something. classes and or activities, or and especially services.
Hmm. You know, I really like seeing churches grow, and I think you agree with me on that. And you know, with that growth comes, I think, growth for the individual that's taking care, that's kind of overseeing that growth as well. So, in your spiritual life and work, especially concerning you taking care of this parish, which lives and teachings of the saints assist and encourage you the most?
Hmm. Boy, that's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. Well, most recently, when I first read the book Wounded by Love by Elder, now Saint Porphyrios, it changed my life. And specifically, the whole concept of not, we think of spiritual warfare as like putting up your dukes and fighting the evil one somehow. And you're going to lose every time if you do it yourself, if you're trying to have do it yourself Orthodox spirituality. So, what he taught, and it's so simple, I said, how did I not know this? You just, if you have a problem, don't look at it. Don't keep looking at it and gazing at it and worrying about it and having anxiety over it. If you have sins, same thing. Anything negative or evil, give that to Christ. And the way you do that, and this is the important part, your posture has to change. You turn your back on evil and say, Lord, I'm looking at you now. I'm not looking at all the stuff of my life, blah, blah, blah. And there's some evil behind me, there's some problems behind me, and they're nipping at my heels. Rather than facing them square on and getting sucked into them or getting like mesmerized by them, I'm looking at Christ. And I said, could you somehow take care of them for me? I'll stay with you if you help me with this and help me with that. And that changed my life. It changed the way I preach, changed the way I do confession. It's a question of not trying or not having to fight this fight all by yourself. And in fact, the lion's share goes to Christ. So Elder Porphyrios was instrumental in that. And of course, the other one I would say is my patron saint, Gregory the theologian. Especially as I've gotten older, I appreciate the fact that he was active archbishop in a huge city, like sitting in charge of councils, and then the people would get a little bit upset with him, let's put it that way. And they drove him out, they would drive him out into exile. And that's where he did his best theology. He wrote, the book on the Holy Trinity, and he wrote a lot of his like reflective theological works while he was alone and in seclusion. And that's looking very attractive to me, to tell you the truth. And then somebody calls and says, can you get to the hospital real quick? And so I have this tension, between trying to back off and live a little bit more secluded, but loving to work with people. And so I'm not quite ready to hang that up yet, because it's a real investment. When you're a pastor, you invest in people's lives. But St. Gregory, he inspires me because he could go, I wouldn't say seamlessly, but he could go efficiently back and forth because he had to do it a couple of times. And when he went back to the office, so to speak, when he went back to being the bishop of an active place, so he never changed. Like he still kind of lived the quiet life prayerfully and quietly and secludedly as much as you could as a bishop. And I admire that. I admire that ability not to get totally sucked in to the life of people, because you could. Oh, I remember there was a Serbian bishop. He was here years ago when I was pastor in Post Falls, Idaho. And he told us, he said, if a man falls into a hole and you want to help him, he said, you can do one of two things. You could throw him a rope and kind of pull him up little by little. It takes his effort and it takes your assistance, and pull him out of the hole that way. The other thing you could do is jump in the hole with him. And that's a temptation sometimes for priests, I think, and for lay people in general. They want to help so much that they get sort of sucked into a person's addictions or problems or whatever, and they become ineffective in terms of helping them. So I think we need to go away, go to the well, so to speak, recharge our batteries, and then come at it again and again and again and again. That's our life.
Right. And through all of this work that you do, what would you say is your favorite part about being a priest and why?
Well, I think it's changed over the years. I mean, serving at the altar has been a constant steadying force when you can just, even for a few moments, a few glimpses of the kingdom of God, when you're standing in front of the altar and you're not being distracted by something, it's like, this is where I'd like to be. I'd probably like to stay here the rest of the day. Like I tease my people, I say, so now that we're almost finished with the service, where are we going to go? That's anything like this. Why don't we just stay here all day and do another service, another service? Wouldn't that be fun? And they look at me and they roll their eyes. But the general spirit is like that, and especially during the daily services when I'm doing a Wednesday morning liturgy or whatever, like it's quiet and there's no place to go. I remember what would I call him? My spiritual grandfather, Yerenda Ephraim. He would say, you you have to serve the liturgy as if you have nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go. Just that's where you are. That's the reason for your existence right there. You have nothing else to do. What else are you going to do? You're serving the liturgy. What else can compare? See, something like that. So it's always the services of the church. But I would say, secondly, and especially most recently, although the thread goes all the way back to when we first moved to Idaho, is teaching catechumen classes. I've been reluctant to hand them off. Occasionally, over the years, I've given some topics of history to somebody, or like if evangelical Protestants are coming in, I'd give them to another layperson, whatever. But in general, I just love forming these new souls in the faith, and laughing with them and weeping with them, then hearing their life confessions, all of it's like one big package. And I'm thoroughly enjoying that these days, even though I know I have to slow down. So maybe you can help me, Yanni. How do I slow down and still want to maintain that high level of energy, and especially when it comes to teaching?
Um, a lot of magnesium glycinate and fervent prayer asking for energy. That's the ticket.
Well, the
Um,
prayer, magnesium glycinate, I have to buy some of that.
oh yeah, I'll send you my supplement stack. It's crazy. I experiment with my own body like a guinea pig every week just to see what plant-based supplements work for me. I've been trying chlorophyll past couple weeks. It's been fun.
That's great.
Um, Now through all this, I'm sure you've seen and done a lot. So what would you consider throughout your time as a priest the most impactful or important moment, and why did it leave such an impression on you?
Oh, a singular moment. I don't know.
If you could pick one.
Gosh, so many of them. So many of them. Like when I've traveled abroad a lot to Orthodox countries over the years. I need like every 3 or 4 years, it seems, a real boost, and that'll get me through another 3 or 4 years by going to you name it, Greece and Romania, the Holy Land, Cyprus, visiting the holy places and meeting certain people. And certain elders that I've met abroad have really impacted my life, as well as the saints who, and of course, one of them, like I mentioned, is Yerenda Frem. He would, you would tell him your confession, and sometimes you didn't even have to tell him your confession. He would tell you. He would say, "Okay, this." I said, "Oh my gosh, wow! I have a glimpse of the judgment seat when I'm going to be read from top to bottom." So that's very impactful when that it changes. You become Orthodox, but then when something like that comes, like where you're miracles, you're seeing them, you're experiencing them for yourself, in yourself. Then you really become, how can I say, like inner Orthodox somehow. I don't know what that means. It's just like now I know in my very essence, in my heart of hearts, what the faith is and who I'm supposed to be in that faith. But that would happen abroad too. Like we had my son and I, Maximus, we had the great blessing to meet Elder Justin Parvu in Romania, Petrovoda, before he reposed. That was a fantastic experience, and he truly gave some prophetic advice to my son. So I won't say too much about that because that's not my life, that's his. But
Right.
but just to be there and witness that, I mean, amazing. Those kinds of things have been the most impactful. Like I would, when I was first ordained, and people would confess to me, and they would ask me questions, and I'd say, I don't know. I learned how to say the word I don't know a million times. I said, but the elder's coming. He's going to be at the neighboring Greek parish, and so the Greek priest in the neighboring parish would open up 3 or 4 hours for us, and I would go in with my people to get into Ephraim, and they would confess, and he would tell them amazing things, and I was so blessed to be privy to those things. And some sticky situations, I said, I don't know how he's going to do this one. And he would tell one person one thing, and he would tell another person the same exact thing with one word difference, which was the exact opposite word. It was amazing. And it saved the whole situation, it saved relationships. I said, how could he know that? So those are impactful moments. I tell you.
Of course. And I'm really happy that you mentioned your travels because I wanted to talk about some of them. And first one being your trip to Tanzania, and maybe tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Tanzania, okay. Tanzania. Well, that trip, well, first of all, I was looking at going to the island of Mauritius, which is basically a dock in the middle of nowhere in the Indian Ocean. And I called OCMC. I talked to Father Martin about, maybe going to Mauritius and possibly, being a long-term missionary there. So he said, okay, that's fine. But listen to this. Listen to how he negotiates. He said, but first you have to go to Tanzania. You have to do about 3 weeks in Tanzania, leading a short-term mission trip. I said, oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Well, I never thought of that. But we went to Tanzania, my wife and I, and a little team of missionaries. And our job was to do, what would it be? It would be called basically teaching readers, teaching teachers, teaching. People would come from all the parishes in 100-mile radius, walking or by bicycle or whatever. And that was very powerful. So we designated like who would do what teaching on the team, and we taught everything from history of the Orthodox Church to how to do a Sunday school class to health. My wife's a medical technologist, so how to do health, a lot of health concerns with AIDS epidemic and with malaria and everything. They were fascinated by every topic that we gave them, and they would come every day, like I don't know, week and a half, 2 weeks, and they would meet on a different topic led by different team members. Oh, that was fantastic, that educational. And I met then the bishop of the area, Bishop Hieronymus, who's now a metropolitan. And Hieronymus was he's an African, an indigenous African. I think he was born in Uganda, but he was down in Tanzania. And to serve with him, I tell you, Yoni, I've never met such a humble bishop. I mean, like just to stand in his presence and serve it was another great blessing in my life, another moment, if you will, to be with such a sweet bishop like that.
Right.
So that was our missionary trip, which was only 2 or 3 weeks, but it was impactful. We saw in Tanzania that they have nothing, but yet they have everything, and we have everything, and we so many times don't have anything. It's impoverished. The kids we would put all our plastic water bottles in some kind of a pit, I remember, and they would be gone the next day. They utilize them for everything. They don't have trash there. Everything is useful. I saw a little child with one of those tops that go on a bucket, those white tops, and he had fastened it to a stick, and he was using it as a toy, like pushing it around like a little cart or something. I said, if some of our kids could only see this and live like this, it made you think. It made us weep. In fact, my wife wanted to think about adopting some little babies. And I said, oh my gosh, sweetie, I don't think we can do that right now because, they all had some debilitating disease. Many were born with AIDS. Many were born with malaria. And I don't know if it would break our heart to raise this child for a year or so and then have it die. It's just that happens a lot. So I said, we're not quite ready for that. But the very next year, I went to Guatemala and did another mission trip with my daughter. And out of that trip, we adopted three girls from the Hogar Rafael Ayal at the Orthodox orphanage. We took them home. Oh, well, it took 2 years, but we got them home.
That's
So
beautiful.
everything in its own good time, right?
Of course. And I also saw you took a trip to Guatemala. I was hoping you could maybe tell me a little bit about. Well, wait, you went to Meridius first, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
piggybacked on that trip to Tanzania was our initial desire to go to Mauritius and see what that's like. It's called Paradise Island, by
What was that
the way.
like?
Well, if you stay on the coast and stay in the resorts, it's paradise. But if you go interior, the island is only like 60 by 90 miles, I think. And then there's such an incredible history. There's a caste system there based on the color of your skin. So we had to learn all of this. So it doesn't have an indigenous population. First, I think the Dutch went there first. They didn't stay. The Portuguese went there. They didn't stay. But the French went and they stayed there. And thus the name Mauritius. They stayed and then they imported slaves from Madagascar, which is the nearest, like about 1,000 miles to the west. They brought them there. And so now you have this subculture and they developed their own form of French, Creole or French, like a pidgin French, so that their French slaves would not understand anything they were saying. It's fascinating. And then through some deal, some war with Britain, then the British took it over, like in the 1800s. And then, so the three languages, the English is now the official language. And then there's French. And then there's this like French mixture kind of thing that, many of them still speak. So what's it like? It was Roman Catholic, the French obviously brought Roman Catholicism there. And then the British brought a ton of people from India, like not slaves, but basically slaves, indentured servants and that kind. So now it's over 50% Hindu, the island. And there's been Hindu Christian tensions over the years. And there's a small Orthodox community that's emigrated there from Russia, from Serbia, from other places. And the bishop, what was his name? Nectarios, years ago, went from Australia. He was a Greek bishop. He went from Australia to every time he would go to Mount Athos or to Greece, he would stop there. He would stop in because it's under the Patriarchate of Alexandria, so he would be going to meetings in Alexandria. But he would stop there because the plane can only go so far. They have to refuel, etc. And he brought all this Australian money and built this amazingly beautiful temple there. It didn't have iconography yet, but it was like a perfect Orthodox church. And I said, oh, I would love to be the priest here, the first priest ever to serve here, because he was the only cleric that served on the island of Mauritius at that time, Bishop Nectarios. But very soon after we left Mauritius, he and was it the patriarch himself? They had a helicopter crash and they all died
Oh my
in the
goodness.
helicopter crash. Yeah, this is a little before your time, Yanni, I think. But well, when were you born?
99.
Okay, so you were small. You were a young
Right.
child, but that changed everything. I think and it took them a long time to get all of that sorted out and get another bishop that would take charge of Mauritius. Anyway, so the thing about Mauritius, we ran into a couple of things that prevented us from going there. One is that I think a priest who goes there has to get steeped in Hindu lore, like figure out like the best way to reach out to that particular culture, like with the Hinduism and with all. And I didn't have any background in that at all. And I said, okay, well, I could study, but it might be a bit of a climb. And the other was, well, it just, my wife had gotten poisoned, drugged by some street food that she felt like for weeks afterwards, she couldn't get over that. And she says, I don't necessarily want to be sick while we're over there, and have our children sick. And I said, okay, forget it. We'll stay in the United States of America, even though we loved the possibilities. I said, look at this brand new church, dear. We can, it'll be great. It'll be filled. We'll have a great time. And she said, no, thank you. No, sir. No, no, no. And you know what, Yanni, when you get married, that's a big part of the equation. You have to take the counsel of your best counselor. So,
Of course.
then we did more domestic missions. That was that.
Right. Now, you also did Romania, if I'm not mistaken.
Romania, yeah, that was I did Romania. See, when each of my children came of age, this was my dream, my idea. Like from 16 to 18 or whatever, I would take them to a traditional Orthodox country as a rite of passage. My daughter, I took to Greece, and we went to the island of Patmos and some other island. And then my second, he was my son Maximus, then we went to Romania. So, and we went, both of those trips were with a family of that heritage to do translation. And then they would let us go on our own for a while. It was very fascinating to take some people from that culture to show us around and get us started. Romania, I don't know even where to begin. Romania, it was one exciting adventure after another in Romania. Let's see. I'll tell you a little story about Romania. I was with my translator was a recent seminary graduate who's since become a priest. His name was Valentin, and he was very, very excited about the faith. So it was perfect because he would be excited. The American priest was coming; he was going to be his translator. So we were driving to various places, various monasteries in Romania, and one day we're driving, and I'm driving the family who took us over there. His father had an old beater car, like it would stick shift, and I wasn't so great at stick shift, but I said, I could do it. So I'm driving this old stick shift. I can't remember even what kind of car it was. And we're driving, and Valley says to me, "Oh, we have to make a quick detour." My girlfriend, who's now his wife, his priatessa, my girlfriend, her village is right over here. So we went to this village, and I tell you what, it was all mud streets, and the very small little parking area at the front of the village was, I don't think it was big enough for one car to back all the way up. But I pulled in there, and of course the first thing was a bar, and I pull up in front of the bar, and I have this stick shift thing going, and oh my gosh, I had it like I took my foot off the brake, and then it lunged forward and knocked down all the bicycles that were in
Oh
front
my
of it.
goodness.
And all these Romanians who might have had a little too much to drink, they all come out and start yelling at me in Romanian. And Valley is very upset. He's like scared. He says, "What are we going to do, Father? What are we going to do? What are we?" I said, "Relax. One advantage to being American, money solves everything. Can we give them a few bucks?" He said, "Yes, yes, that is a very good idea." So we're standing there. These guys are all hollering at me, and they're saying that this bike it's worth this, it's worth that. And I said, "I don't even see any damages. Come on, my friends, what's happening here?" And one of them was very scared. He was very afraid of me, and he said, "Why are you saying all of those strange words?" I was speaking English. He said, "Please don't say those strange words." I mean, this was an encounter that you wouldn't normally have, on a pilgrimage. And I was getting tired of it. I said, "Valley, what can we give them? Can we give them like the equivalent of like 15 bucks American?" And he said, "Oh yes, Father, that would be wonderful." So we went into the trunk because we had the form of money was leu, 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 I think. was the form of their currency. And you know, you have to carry suitcases of it around, you know, because it wasn't worth very much. So we had a stack that the equivalent of 15 US. And we gave it to them and they scattered. They went back inside and I asked Valley, I said, you think they fixed their bikes with that money that we gave them? I don't think so. Anyway, so we're driving and his girlfriend calls and says, you know, you better take a different route back home because word is getting around that there's an American priest in this description of our car who's handing money out of the trunk of his car, just willy-nilly. So don't come back this way. I said, word gets around fast in a little village. So experiences like that, you have some very sublime experiences, like when we met Elder Justine Pardo, and then you have some very, how shall we say, you know, just down to earth experiences that are funny, that kind of round out the trip.
That's beautiful.
I met the Patriarch Baptiste by
Oh,
accident.
how was that?
Oh my gosh, it's another story. We were at Nantes, you know, where St. Paisius Velichkovsky, his like a lot of his vestments were there and his relics. So they let me put his stole. They put his stole on me. And I said, oh my gosh, please take the stole off. I appreciate it, but you know, it's too amazing for me. And we met there at that monastery. The radio personality or the spokesperson for the Patriarchate of Romania. He's a priest, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to do an interview. Our people don't know that there's priests and churches in America, Orthodox." He said, "Do I have time?" I said, "Oh, gosh, we were leaving on a Monday, flying out." I said, "But maybe if I get back to Bucharest, we could do it." So we get back to Bucharest, and it's a Saturday, and he interviews me that Saturday afternoon, and then I took a shot. I said, "Well, do you think that maybe we could swing by the Patriarchal Cathedral and get the Patriarch's blessing and da, da, da." And he said, "You know what? He just happens to be in town. Come on." And he drove me there. And I met Patriarch Baptiste of blessed memory. And he was so excited. He says, "I am very close friends with Patriarch Ignatius of Antioch. We are the best friends." Oh, I said, "And now I am friends with Porinte Gregory. Like he's my best." I said, "This is a little bit over the top." Wow. We exchanged gifts. I gave him something. And then he invited me, get this, the next day was Sunday. He invited me to serve with him on his feast day. It was the feast of Saint Theoctistos.
Oh, that had to be nice.
His patron saint. And only bishops from all over Romania were serving, and the brotherhood of that, you know, patriarchal monastic brotherhood. I said, well, I guess. And I was going to just serve with that priest the next day, and he lives like on the outskirts of the city. And he said, "Well, I guess you won't be serving with me tomorrow." He said, "But if I were you, I would have prepared a little something to say. He'll probably want you to say something." I said, "Okay, that's a good heads up." The next day, I get there, and there's an English-speaking bishop, Bishop Vincent in Kentiu, and he said, "Okay, the patriarch would like you to speak during the liturgy on behalf of the Patriarch of Antioch,
Whoa.
like to greet him on his feast day." I said, "How did I get into this? I'm just a little bumbling, stumbling parish priest who happens to be on a pilgrimage in Romania." But I asked to get his blessing. So now look at all the blessings I'm getting. So we said, so he set us up. You'll speak right after the bishop. I don't know. He was from the Black Sea area. After he's finished preaching, okay. So I get my translator, Valley. I said, "Valley, you better translate word for word what I say, because if we say the wrong thing, we'll both end up behind barbed wire. Come on now." So we start talking, and I decided I was going to talk about the heart of a patriarch, you know, like what goes in there, like, because he took a lot of criticism over the communist years and I said, none of us really knows what's going on inside the heart of a patriarch. It's him and Christ figuring all of that out by the power of the Holy Spirit. All we can do is look on, pray for him, admire. And so it turned out he really loved it. But my translator, his hands are moving, he's translating. I said, "Oh my gosh, I hope he's saying what I'm saying," because he was a very zealous young man. So anyway, at the end, it was received very well. And then they invited us to this big banquet. I was sitting next to the Turkish ambassador to Romania,
Wow.
and like it was this all these dignitaries, and all I could say was, how do I get? How am I going to explain this to my bishop? You know, that I have possibly caused an international incident, but not
I'll
really.
just show him this video, you know?
Yeah, so it worked out. It worked out. Glory to God.
Glory be to
But you see
God.
what I mean? When you go on pilgrimage, things just happen. They pop up out of nowhere, and you have to be open to that. Let your itinerary go a little bit here and there. That's the way we've done all of our pilgrimages. Even when I brought like 40 or 50 people, like to Holy Land, to Cyprus, let it happen. It's going to happen. As
Yeah.
it happens, as it unfolds, we'll go with the punches.
When we get off the podcast, I'll tell you some of the stories about how no matter where I travel in Greece, no matter what bishops or gerondas I meet, everybody is related one way or another. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter. It's such a small world. Well, at
Yeah.
least I mean, over there, we're a small country, but it's just
And
everybody's together
especially
like that.
especially the spiritual relationships.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is my spiritual father. This is the one that I have gone to school with. This is, all kinds of uh, common people.
And did we go over Guatemala? Or did we go we went over
Guatemala. What do you want to know
Guatemala.
about Guatemala?
Tell me what Guatemala's like. I've never been.
Well, we went there the first time, and this is the time where things started collapsing in terms of adoptions from Guatemala because there was a lot of corruption in adoptions. These disreputable lawyers there, they had baby farms and they would sell the children abroad for hundred
Baby
thousand.
farms.
Yeah, they were prostitutes who just have babies to sell, and they'd all make a profit off it.
Oh,
That's
that's
why
rough.
that's why our State Department shut that process down. They shut down adoption in Guatemala.
Wow.
To this day, I think you can. So this orphanage, which wasn't practicing, the Orthodox orphanage wasn't practicing those abominable practices, but still it got caught up in the kind of grand sweep of things, and so no adoptions. So we were running into the end of that, or the end of adoption, because some families right after us, they were not going to be able to adopt. So how did it go? So on our little mission trip, we were doing teaching, and I was going around and anointing all the kids. There were 150 students there. It was great. And I asked one of the nuns, I said, so you're not adopting anyone? She goes, no, right now we can. And then she brings out this photo album and she starts showing us. And this little family of three sisters, they needed it. So I said, okay, let me look around. And you never know. I wasn't really thinking of adoption. But then the more I traveled with them, I went into their classes, and then one of them, the middle one, she comes out of a building way across the green, and she says, "Poppy." She's like calling me her daddy, "Poppy." And then the oldest one asked, unbeknownst to me, she asked the nun, "Could Father Gregory adopt us?" They were always so starving to be adopted, and not come of age in an orphanage. So I called my wife. I said, well, what would you think of adopting three little girls from Guatemala? And we had two families in our parish who each adopted three already.
Oh
So
my
it was not
goodness.
not unknown to us. And she said, why do they always come in threes? And I said, well, we're Orthodox, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Trinitarian, come on. So I said, think about it, give it a couple of days, whatever. So the next time I talked to her, she says, well, how could I say no to these three little girls, da da da. So that whole mission experience, that mission team experience, was primarily about, adopting the girls. And we went back several times. You have to do some mandatory trips before you adopt. And then subsequently to that, several of the girls, one of my own and one from another family, we went back on trips later, like just kind of coming of age trips where they could see where they were from. And we went all around to volcanoes and lakes. And, it's quite a place. It's very, very, and now the monastery is up on Lake Atitlan, Lake Atitlan. And it's a glorious view and a glorious place. And I think it would be very easy for an Orthodox priest to actually live there, to go there, an American, because the cost of living is very inexpensive. It's a little bit dangerous in the cities, a lot of crime, a lot of trouble. But you get out to a place like that, and you could live that life of seclusion that I was telling you about before, Yanni. Now you got me thinking, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the sisters took us on excursions here and there to, like I said, tourist places where there's volcanoes and there's an old city that I always bought church fabric there, like hand woven Guatemalan fabric in the street market, and it was like pennies on the dollar. And I still have them on some of my tables in the altar. Many good quality looms. So those were like not exactly like an Orthodox pilgrimage, except for the monastery. They were more, how shall I say, enjoyable pilgrimages of a different kind. We gained 3 of our children.
That's beautiful. Glory be to God.
Really beautiful.
And I think the last major place you ended up traveling to, unless I'm missing some, was the Holy Land. And
Yeah, and just this February, I was telling you about the coming of age trips.
mhm.
Finally, my son and his wife, who live with us, they live downstairs. They stormed into the house and they said, you owe Sebastian his coming of age trip. He's only in his mid-30s now. I said, oh my gosh. He wanted me to go to Manassas. I said, I'm getting too old to climb mountains and go up and down it. I said, but I'll take you to Cyprus. Because I had fallen in love. We went to Cyprus in, I think, 2017, my wife and I. So that was another place we went to and met the Metropolitan Athanasios. I served with him. Talk about humble bishops. Metropolitan Athanasios of Limassol. He is very, like, it's like serving with a saint. Just so beautiful. I mean, you know who he is.
Mhm.
He's the one with the pseudonym Father Maximus in the books by Kyriakos Markidis. He
Yes.
writes, he writes like, what is it called? Gifts of the Desert, the Inner River, and Mountain of Silence. And so to get to know him a little bit, amazing, just amazing. Um, and this last trip, we met Metropolitan Neophytus of Morphu. He spent a whole hour with us. So, and so I finally took him on his rite of passage. And Cyprus is the land of monasteries. It really is. It's a land of saints. A lot of saints come from there. I
Yeah.
hadn't known it. I hadn't known that before I traveled there. So if you're going to do a trip to the Holy Land, which of course you're not going to do one right now with the war, but if you ever get the chance to do a trip to the Holy Land, gosh, Cyprus is very close and it's a very easy kind of add-on for even if you do like 3-4 days. It's amazing. But the Holy Land itself, I've been there 4 times. And for the last 3 times, I've taken large groups of 45 to 50 people. And life changing. I mean, to go there, life changing. To serve in the Holy Sepulchre, life changing.
Wow.
Yeah, for people. Because this is the center, of course, our faith.
Did you get to see the Tomb of the Panagia? Did you get to check that out?
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's just on the hem, on the fringe of the Garden of Gethsemane. So you go down there, and of course she's not there. Her tomb is there, but she's not there, obviously. And apparently some other faiths have had altars there over the years, including somehow the Muslims. The Muslims had an altar there because they honor her as mother of a great prophet, et cetera, whatever. But
Hmm.
I thought that fascinating, the interplay and the overlap between all the faiths. First of all, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, but also even all the Christian faiths themselves. It's very fascinating, like to go to the Orthodox places and occasionally to some of the Roman Catholic places. It's to see what they've done with those areas and what we do with holy sites, we build churches above them, obviously. And so the tomb of the Theotokos does not have a church above, but they serve there downstairs. They do the Paraclesis all the time at her tomb. Very nice, very beautiful.
Yeah, that's
You have to,
one thing I
you
want
have
to
to
see.
kind of, yeah, you have to kind of go in one door, and then there's her tomb, and you venerate, you prostrate before her tomb, and then you go out the other door. So you're in there. It's like a little chamber that you can go in there. Now, the real inner chamber is the tomb of Christ in the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And have you ever been?
I've never been to Israel at all. I've I like to stick to my little comfort zone, which is my
Which
which
is that
is
room right there with all the icons?
yeah, my yeah, this little room and then God knows those are my two comfort zones. I like my island and I like my office. So,
So I served at the Holy Sepulchre, I don't know, 3 times, maybe 4 times. But you're sitting in the altar. Now just picture the church oriented towards the east. You're sitting in the altar waiting for the blessing to serve that day. And there are bishops always from all over the world. Every Saturday night, they do the Paschal liturgy every Saturday night at 11 o'clock or 11:30 or midnight, just like Pascha, because it's Jerusalem. It's where he rose from the dead. So, so after the Orthros, you come out, all the clergy process out to the narthex where the tomb is. The tomb is in the narthex or outside of the narthex of the church. And so then the bishops go inside and they serve facing east on the other side of the table. So it's oriented a little different. And the people are in between the altar and the tomb of Christ. And the clergy come out on either side facing each other.
oh
And,
wow.
and then when you have Holy Communion, you go in, all the way in, and the bishop gives you the body of Christ on the tomb of Christ. Like how you would receive it on the holy table in the church, you receive it on the tomb of Christ. And then go a little further, and then another bishop gives you the blood of Christ in the tomb of Christ. Amazing.
That's unbelievable. I gotta make the trip. I gotta see, God willingly, all the craziness over there kind of simmers down eventually, and I can make the trip.
That's right. I wouldn't go during the war when the bombs are flying, but I
Yeah,
did tell
that'd
people
be a
to,
little uncomfortable, you know, be a little bit inconvenient, just a tad, you know.
like you could put in. I'm thinking about making a brochures. Martyrdom, no extra charge. Like you die on pilgrimage. It'll be a blessing.
Charge him an extra $50 for like a plate carrier, yeah.
But seriously, I always was telling the people on those pilgrimages, look, you could pay a lot of attention to the political realities around you with planes flying overhead. They were bombing Lebanon in the year 2000. So that's already how many years ago? And or you can watch the checkpoints where the Israelis are, you have to go through, your bus has to stop, and machine guns everywhere. You could look at that. You could notice all of that. Or you could be on pilgrimage and only notice where Christ has been, where his mother has been, where the monasteries are, where the saints, and you will have a much more peaceful trip and a much more inner trip than looking at all the nonsense that's going on.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great physical metaphor for what Saint Paisios said about temptation, right? You know, the thoughts are like airplanes. You just let them fly overhead. And
Exactly.
you could
Don't let
either
them land. Don't let them land.
don't give them a runway. Yeah. And it's a good metaphor for our daily lives as well because, you know, you could pay attention to this war, that election, this social insanity, whatever, but you know, nothing's really bad if you love Christ. You know, if you operate your life on the basis that God is real and he became man for our salvation and he rose from the dead, you really just have nothing to worry about. Like things are just cool past that point, you know? Things are just good.
Yeah, we have a choice, Lonnie. Our choice is we can let things on the outside into our hearts and affect us negatively. Or we can have Christ in our hearts, shining out and affect the world around us, especially those who we live with, those who we, work with. It's the light can shine out, or we can let the darkness in. That's our choice. Depends on what or who is in our heart.
To be a vessel of grace. Exactly. And throughout all these travels, what do you feel like is the most important lesson that you learned?
Well, that the faith, the church, is everywhere. Like I've been up to Russia 3 times as well too, and to serve with the Russian priests or to serve with any priest anywhere who doesn't even speak English and I don't speak their language. It's an amazing what's the word, connection.
Tell me about Russia. I didn't see that anywhere on the biography. I wanted to ask about that.
Russia, it's the world's best kept secret. No, Russia. Well, so I was there quite a few times. When it was still the Soviet Union in '89, I traveled with my classmate, Father Mark Andrews. And that pilgrimage, I'll tell you one story from that pilgrimage. Because we saw on the faces of all the people, we saw beaming, shining as the result of the suffering that transfigured them, because they went through so much. And in one case, we were at a church in Moscow. I think it was the Tikvin Mother of God Church, and we could see it from our hotel, But to get there, the Soviets had put up all these barriers, like it was a maze to get around. There were wild dogs everywhere, so you had to run the gauntlet and finally find the church. And in that church, there was an old guy and his son. His son was only maybe 12. His son's name was Dmitri, and the old person, he had been in the ministry of, Soviet ministry of something. He was an engineer, and he lost his job because he wanted to go to church and spend a lot of time in the church. So he told us the story that when he did that, he lost everything, and so he spends his life, and Dmitri too, in the church, morning till night, lighting the lamps, keeping the lamps going, visitors coming, and taking care of all the inner needs of the church. And Dmitri, when he would go to school, they would sit him up front and put a big, like, what is he, big dunce cap on his
Yeah.
head and make fun of him. Dimitri's a Christian, ha ha, throw things at him, etc. And he was the most humble young man I've ever met, 12 years old. And he would just, and I brought all these, we had brought from America, smuggled in basically these paper icons, that we take for granted here in the States. And they would flock around on the porch of the church, like gathering them as big blessings because they had no icons. And so he asked me, this father, he said, are these, he spoke perfect English, like with a British accent, are these sanctified by the holy water? Just like that. And I felt, oh my gosh, are they blessed? I said, oh, they care so much for holy little things that we take for granted in the West. So that particular trip, the one when it was still the Soviet Union, really, it got to me. After that, we had a sister to sister parish. So I went back in '95. I went back in 2000, and we went to many monasteries. We saw a lot of things, made a lot of friends, drank too much vodka. Oh yeah. Here's what they do. They pour vodka like this, like in a glass, all the way to the top, and they say the toast to my family, da da da. And then if you don't drink it all the way to the bottom of the glass, it's an insult to them. They're upset. So I kept telling my wife, you have to give me a lot of food while I'm taking all these drinks.
Yeah.
Keep pumping the food to the bottom of the glass, and then they want you to make a toast to the bottom of the glass, and then somebody else makes it to the bottom of the glass. I said, Russians, you're not going to live very long if you keep doing this. Holy mackerel.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I grew up in Greece seeing far too many 80 and 90-year-old men that are still alive slamming down 5 glasses of tsipiro a day like it's
Yeah,
water, and they are still kicking. But
sure enough, sure
yeah,
enough. They're
wow.
pickled. They're pickled. That's why they're left.
Yeah. The sun, like the sun and the water extracts all the toxin out of them. I mean I don't know how they do it in Russia, just because like it's, you don't get sunlight. I mean, you do get sunlight up there. That's a lie. But I mean, still, it's like,
It's
who
cold.
knows?
It's cold. And it's
Maybe
very hot and humid in the summer, and I've pretty much gone in the summer. especially to southern Russia, like down by Rostov and those areas. We also went to Ukraine on that first trip.
How was that?
It was amazing. That was, I think, was it a little bit after Chernobyl? I think it was. I
That had
can't
to be
remember.
intense. Just
It was
the
intense. They had just opened up again for some tourism, and they would only let you go certain places in the Soviet Union. So we got to go to Kiev, then we got to Lvov, and we made a special excursion. We had to pay like all these bribes to go out to Lviv, where the monastery, and we're near there is the monastery of Pachayev. So we went to the Pachayev Miraculous Mother of God. Very nice.
beautiful. Is there anywhere else that you went that I might have looked over? Because I want to hear all about where you've been.
Oh my God. Hey, can I tell you, while we were going on one trip, it was that trip actually to
Oh,
Russia.
to
We
Russia.
we went to Helsinki, Finland. We had a stopover there.
Mm-hmm.
So, the beautiful Finn air, they gave us all kinds of food, and then we get on Aeroflot. Aeroflot. It was like a blanket separating the cockpit, and there was a big hole in it. And
Yeah.
we're on this excursion, but while we were in Finland, we had some time off that day. So we were taking a walk at dusk, like in the park. And this one guy comes up to us, big black trench coat and long hair, and he speaks to us in Finnish.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be born into the Finnish language to even grapple with it at all. So I said, "Oh, English?" And he said, "Ah, English." And he literally, he shakes his head like this. He said, then he said to us, we had our cassettes on, "Why do you wear such dark clothes?" And so I said, "Father Mark, would you like to take this one?" And it was good. He gave a good answer about, you know, kind of dead to the world. We don't have to pray about what we wear in the morning.
That is a good question because I'm sure there's people here that have not heard that answer before. I might do a larger conversation about clerical vestments later on, but why do priests wear black?
Well, not exclusively, but yes, in the Greek,
Gray and blue, just in Greece
but
they
in the
do a lot
Greek,
of gray and
I
blue,
would say
yeah.
in the Middle East and in the Greek tradition, yeah, it is black. It is black. You don't see the colored cassocks that you do in the Russian tradition as often. I mean, obviously they have them, but the question is why black?
The question is generally what's with the getup?
Hey, what's with the getup?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I would say that it's for a monastic, they would always say it's we're dead to the world. And for a priest, it's somewhat like that. Like if you're serving the kingdom of God, like yours is not to have a form-fitted, bright orange cassock where everybody can see everything still and you're kind of showing off. It's almost counterintuitive. It's literally to melt into the woodwork, you know? It's
Hmm.
not to really be noticed as an individual. To be noticed as a priest is one thing. Like if you have 20 flowing cassocks going up and down the street, we'd say, okay, those are priests, right?
Well, that's what a seminary is, so I mean,
Yeah, or seminaries or monks or whatever. But if they're all different, wearing different styles and different colors, and I don't know, it might be a little bit, don't you think, ostentatious?
yeah, a little bit. Like in Greece, you'll walk around and you'll see some priests that have these beautiful light gray ones. They have navy blue ones. It just depends on what they pick up. But it's
And black is very hot, by the way.
yeah, no
Very,
kidding.
it absorbs everything.
Yeah. But I pray that how does the verse go again? What is it? The armor of truth, shield of righteousness, belt of salvation. Remind me how that goes.
Yeah, well, I like to call it the robe of righteousness,
The robe of righteousness.
that we give to the newly baptized, the robe of gladness that they wear. That's supposed to be the undergarment that the priest wears, the stikar, That's
Hmm.
a remnant of the robe of gladness.
Well, may we all put on the robes of righteousness and walk towards the kingdom of God. Father, I cannot thank you enough for coming on today and speaking. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience, and would you mind ending us off with a prayer?
Well, Yanni, the best thing I could say is the shortest thing. Live the life. Live the life. Don't just make believe you're an Orthodox Christian, or don't just make believe that you know so much about the faith, etc. Even if you do, more importantly, live the life. Not so important about what you say, even though you and I have been talking, but it's more important how I'm living. How am I living?
Exactly.
O Lord Jesus Christ, through the prayers of all of our holy fathers, have mercy on us, give us great strength to live the life, and save us. For thy name is holy, always, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen.
Amen. Father, thank you so much. In our next episode, we will be talking to Father Peter Simcoe, and I think we are going to have our first live episode after this comes out, before our interview with Father Peter. And it's going to be Seraphim and Luke. They're going to be on they're going to be doing the Orthochat live. They're going to be bringing in guests. Sometimes they're going to be priests, but I gave them the approval to bring in lay Orthodox Christians that want to talk about the faith and just sit around and discuss things for a couple hours. And I mean, we have so many great things coming. We have the Orthochat temple tours. We're releasing our first one soon, where we're checking out the Church of St. John and Divine in Wheeling, West Virginia. And then we're also starting the Orthochat Passport, where our first episode will be reviewing the life of St. Sava of Galimnos and his church, well, his monastery in Galimnos as well. So, and we're coming out with our clothing brand as well soon, the Stratiatis clothing brand. So Orthodox clothing you can wear anywhere. And besides that, brothers and sisters in Christ, pray for me. Father Gregory, thank you so much for coming on, and may our Lord Jesus Christ, His all holy mother, and all the saints be with you all the days of your lives. We will talk to you all later.
Απολύας ως φύση ο Θείος μου Υιός, σιγάρ κατάγγισε όλος τη αμαρτία και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραθυμία της εξαναστήσης εκείμενο.
Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison, 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 Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison.